we are going to talk about CRT and our crazy, bumpy, wonderful ride from the very beginning to where we are today. And thank God we finally have some protections against CRT here in Texas. So first of all, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you to all of you who wrote emails, gave testimony, made phone calls to your legislators and said, please, 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 please help us get these important bills across the line, because it's so, so important in Texas that we do protect our children. And the best way to protect them is to arm them with facts. And we know that at TFRW. And that's why we say that the first line of prevention against something insidious like CRT is giving them really good, strong foundations of civics. So the more they can learn about American civics, the better engaged they will be, and the more protected they will be in the long run, so that when they hear something, because they will hear it, whether it's illegal or not, you know, this stuff is going to touch them. It's everywhere. But we've done the best we can to insulate our kids, and we'll keep fighting against it. But if we can balance that with giving them a good civics education, then when they have this stuff thrown at them, they can see it for what it is and say, no, I don't think so. And that's what we want, is we want children that can think for themselves. So thank you all so much for being engaged on this very, very important subject that we kind of got thrown into. It wasn't our intention at all, but happy to do it. That's what TFRW does. So our intention tonight is to basically give you the roadmap of where we started and how we got to here, because it was a crazy upside down, wild roller coaster ride. And there was a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation out there. And we thought this would be a good opportunity, now that it's done and over with and we won. Thank you. That we can yeah, there's a happy dance. That we can just break it down and say, this is the path that we followed, and this is how we got here. And so that if you get asked questions, you can say, this is what it was. Because unless you were following it every day, it was a little bit confusing at times. So I would like to turn this over to Robbi Hull, my amazing, amazing, amazing friend, Vice President of Legislation for Texas Federation of Republican Women. Could not have had a better partner in crime. We rattled a lot of cages down there at the legislature, and that they respect you a lot, Robbi, and I appreciate that. It's good to have a teammate like you when we're working on legislation. So Robbi, why don't you go ahead and start?
Well, thank you, Glynis. And as Glynis said, it was quite the roller coaster ride. It wasn't exactly what we had signed up for at the beginning, but all in all, we got a great result. And so that's what we want, is the results, and we're very happy about the results. I got kicked out temporarily, so I'm not sure if Glynis mentioned, but I want to go ahead and let you know that the governor did sign Senate Bill 3 today. So it is law now. And I think it's a great addition to our arsenal in protecting our kids in their education. Plus, as Glynis said, it also will give them some new tools. So let me start from the beginning. More than a year ago, TFRW knew that civics education was one of our legislative priorities. And so we were invited to participate with a coalition and work on drafting civics education bills to present to the legislature this session. And of course, the need for civics education only became more widely recognized at how badly it was needed after the 2020 election. We already had a very good head start on our drafting plans. And so we worked with members of the education community and others. I'm sure that you all know that most legislation that is submitted during the session is not drafted by the legislators themselves. It is submitted by other interests. And so we, as this other interests were working on civics education legislation. We had members from Texas Public Policy Foundation, myself, Texas, the State Board of Education, YMCA, Texas Women's University, other entities very involved in education. And our plan was to come up with civics education bills, very well-rounded civics education bills. We managed to come up with this really good bill. We got a resolution from the Texas Supreme Court in advance of the session supporting what we were doing, which is very unusual, but very appreciated. Unfortunately, when the session started and we got to the filing deadline of March 12th, our bill still had not been picked up by the person who was intended to be its author in the Senate. So in a last minute pickup, because civics education should be nonpartisan anyway, it was picked up by Judith Zaffarini, and then later our bill was co-sponsored by Angela Paxton. So it did have a Republican sponsor. Unfortunately, that bill didn't go anywhere, and neither did the bill that we were supporting that was filed by Keith Bell in the House. So time kind of ticked on, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was not on anybody's radar screen, nobody was aware of it, Senate Bill 2026 was passed out of the Senate. And Senate Bill 2026 was authored by Senator, or sponsored by Senator Creighton, and had a companion in the House, House Bill 3979, that was sponsored by Representative Toth. When 2026 passed out of the Senate, 2026 was based on a national model that didn't take into account specifics in various states. And unfortunately, the people that actually drafted the law and submitted it to Creighton to carry it weren't aware of that, or I don't know what happened. But when that bill passed the Senate, excuse my language, but all hell broke loose in the education community, because it caused all kinds of problems because of some of the language in the statute. It was going to prevent the teaching of TEKS, which is your Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, that had been in the TEKS for decades. So because we had been so involved in the civics education end of things, and because this bill actually had a civics education component to it, we were asked to please come in and help fix it. So at that point in time, we became part of a group that worked with Representative Toth, Senator Creighton, Senator Hughes came on board, the Lieutenant Governor, various people from Texas Public Policy Foundation and others. We had State Board of Education members, and we're also very fortunate that we have 2 State Board of Education members that are members of TFRW. So we have that expertise available to us in TFRW, which is wonderful. So we all worked on crafting the language that we would want for a bill that would prohibit CRT, but also would do more than that. And it would provide a well-rounded civic education for our children. So not just a knowledge base, but a skills and an attitudes base, so that they are actually learning how to participate as a citizen in our democracy. And also how to train our teachers, because as many of you know, we may have been the last generation that had any semblance of civics education at all. So many people that are teaching today haven't had civics themselves. So we wanted a avenue for the teachers to get what they call professional development. In my world, in the legal world, it's called continuing education. But continuing education in civics education, so that they would be prepared to teach civics to their students. So we crafted this very well-rounded bill. In the House, Representative Toth felt like, because it did not go through committee, it was just going to hit the floor, and he didn't really want to open it up for all these amendments. He felt like it would be too big of a fight, and we might not get it through. So the plan was to pass 3979 in the format that 2026 had come to the House. And then when we got over to the Senate, we would amend it and we would pass the better bill that we had all worked on out of the Senate. I don't know, probably none of y'all are nerdy enough to have watched the floor hearings for 3979, but he was right, it was a zoo. And the Democrats did attempt to make amendments. Most of their amendments related to the document section of the bill and what they would, what documents they wanted in the bill, which all the documents largely, some of the documents don't even exist. And then other of the documents was really a backdoor way to get critical race theory into the classroom anyway. When we got to the Senate, that was stripped out. The civics, the avenues for educating the teachers was added. Those are civics academies that will be formed by the Commissioner of Education in assistance with a committee, and then reviewed by the State Board of Education, and then annually reviewed by the State Board of Education to make sure that our civics teachers are properly being educated on how to teach civics, and so that CRT can't creep in that way. Civics education, we got the well-rounded civics education, and then of course we got the prohibition on CRT. The Senate version would have prohibited CRT in all grades and all courses. The version that had passed the House, 3979, the version that Representative Toth didn't want to open up for amendment because of all the reasons I've already explained, only applied to the required social studies curriculum. So it was very limited in scope of what courses CRT would have been prohibited in. And as Representative Toth and I talked about, most CRT is reportedly being taught in English and language arts. So basically, the bill that passed the House would not have prohibited much CRT teaching. Our great bill was laid out just beautifully by Senator Hughes. I can't say enough about him. He's really remarkable, and any of you that are in his Senate district are extremely fortunate. And he did a great job of laying it out and deflecting all the garbage that came from the Democrats, and our bill passed the Senate. At that point in time, all it needed was to go into the House and be concurred to, and then it would go on its way to the governor. Unfortunately, Representative Toth was in Washington, D.C. at the time. He did not get to enter his concurrence before the Democrats raised a point of order. The parliamentarian, who is a Democrat in the House, recommended that the point of order be sustained, and unfortunately the point of order was sustained. At that point in time, all the good stuff we had added to 3979 got stripped out. And so we were left with a bill that went to the governor that everybody recognized was incomplete and had problems. So that is why the governor, who, you know, he was aware of that too. Anybody who read the bill could see that it was problematic and it was incomplete, added it to the special session. So here we go, we start session one, and we get, of course, the bill comes out of the Senate and goes over to the House, and before it can be voted on in the House, we lost quorum. Session one ends. When the special session ends, you have to start all over again. So special session two started, the Senate immediately passed it, and it went over to the House. It had a little bit of problems in committee. Eventually, and really close to the deadline of the end of session two, because if you remember, the Democrats didn't come back all that quickly. Towards the end of the second session, we finally got it out of committee. We got it to the floor, and you know, there was a couple of amendments. They were amendments we could all live with. It passed out of the House. It went to the Senate. They immediately concurred and sent it to the governor. And as I said earlier, it is now law. So now in the state of Texas, what is commonly called critical race theory, but what has specifics in the statute. And if you haven't read the statute, I encourage you all to read Senate Bill 3 as it was engrossed and sent to the governor out of Special Session 2. It prohibits any type of teaching where students are made to feel like they are either oppressors or victims because of their skin color or their sex or their sexual orientation. It prohibits specifically the teaching of the 1619 Project, but it also has another separate provision that prohibits any suggestion that the founding of this country was based on the protection of slavery, and among other things. So it is a good bill. It's a strong bill. I think people feel like it's likely that it will be challenged in the courts, but we do feel like ultimately it will prevail. And TFRW is very proud of the work that we did on it, and that we got to be part of helping our children be educated on civics in the future, but also protecting them from the type of harmful information that is passed along in the form of the CRT teaching. All of this will be implemented by Commissioner Morath, who is appointed by Governor Abbott, and the Texas Education Agency, which he is the head of. They will have to comply with the statute, and then the State Board of Education will have a role in it also. And like I said, they will have an annual review of the civics academies and the teaching. Now, some people ask, and I'm just going to go ahead and address some of the questions that I've had. What type of enforcement mechanism is in the statute? We knew when we were passing it, we did not have an enforcement mechanism in the statute. We were told that we didn't need an enforcement mechanism in the statute because the Texas Education Agency has things available in its tool chest where they can basically penalize schools that aren't complying. So things like they won't accredit them. That's pretty serious. So there are things that can be done to make sure that the school districts are complying. I guess it's going to largely be up to us to pay attention to what's going on with our children in school. And by all means, if we think are questionable, then we should reach out to the State Board of Education, to our representatives on the State Board of Education. And you could even reach out to Texas Federation of Republicans, and we'll be happy to look into it and get with the right parties. So I think this is a really strong move going. I know there were a number of questions, and so Glynis, I don't know if you want me to go ahead and start addressing the questions. Something you wanted to add before I start addressing questions?
I will just say before you start addressing questions, I would like to just, put a dot on that I about the reading the statute. I think we kind of joked about it this year, but next year, I think we need to make TFRW t-shirts that say, read the bill. Because ladies, we are smart, we are bright, we are intelligent women. And I don't think anyone should take someone else's word for it just because they say so. I don't want you to get an action alert from Robbi and just take her word for it that this is what it says. Read it, say, okay, that's good information. Now click the link and read the bill so that you know for yourself what it says. Don't take my word for it. Don't get an action alert from anybody and just take their word for it. You don't want your children to go to school and just take something that they're taught as the word of God. Correct? Well, then we have to be good examples and think for ourselves. And that starts by reading the bill. So I'm just going to encourage you one more time, please, 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 and tell everyone you are the leaders in our organizations. When you're going and speaking at groups, tell them how important it is to read this legislation for themselves. ask the good questions, but you can't ask good questions if you haven't read it for yourself. That's how we get misinformation out there, is by not actually reading the bill. I can't tell you how many times people would say, well, what about this or what about that? I'm like, that's not in this bill. Have you read this bill? And then, well, no, but I'm like, okay, well, let's go back. Let's read the bill and then let's talk about it, because you can't have a discussion if you're not on the same page.
And that's why when I send an action alert, I include a link to the bill, because I want you to read the bill. It's very important to read the bill. And there was so much misinformation and disinformation that went out about this bill and about TFRW. And I just want to assure you, and maybe you haven't heard it, but many of you did, there was no point in time that TFRW was promoting critical race theory. That was a bald-faced lie.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it showed up in a number of email blasts or blogs. I don't know what you want to call them, but by people who should have known better. And had they ever taken the time to read the bill and read what the bill said and seen what we were working on, they would have known they were making factually false statements. So the other thing I want to say along that line is, anytime you hear somebody saying something about TFRW that you're like, that doesn't sound like TFRW to me, please let us know and inquire, because it's a lot easier to stop the misinformation at the beginning, at the source, before it gets circulated in a bunch of emails. And so if there's something that makes you scratch your head and think, that doesn't sound right, well, it likely isn't. And so please contact one of your board members and follow up. So here's some of the questions that people sent in. And I already addressed this first one a little bit. It's, how will we overcome the influence the TEA tries to assert? Well, first of all, like I said, the TEA is not some evil entity. It's run by Commissioner Morath, who is appointed by Governor Abbott. So it is an agency. This is a statute. This is the law. And it is something that the agency will have to follow. The timing of this statute happens to be really good, because 2022 is a year that the State Board of Education will start reviewing, and the TEA will start reviewing and revising our TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So all the great new stuff that we got added to help make a well-rounded civics education, all of that will be added to the TEKS. So this is great timing, as well as, helping formulate a curriculum that will filter out, because this is mandated at the state level. Individual school districts are not going to have their opportunities to formulate their own teaching. They're going to have to follow what is mandated at the state level, the agency pushes out. And having spoken and worked with Commissioner Morath on a number of occasions, I have confidence that he will carry forward the statutory intent, and it will be carried forward into our children's classrooms. All right, so one of the questions is, when will Senate Bill 3 begin in a selected group and then expand? No, this is a statewide, this is state statute. And again, it's applicable today, because the governor signed it today. So going forward, these types of things are prohibited in the classroom, and it will apply all over the state. The implementation process by the State Board of Education and the TEA and the commissioner obviously will take a little bit of time, but this is law today. Okay, so as far as the drafting of this bill and what made this bill, I think, as good as it is it was all conservative leadership that worked on this bill. I mean, we had, like I said, the lieutenant governor, we had conservatives in the House and the Senate, the members of us from TFRW, Texas Public Policy Foundation, State Board of Education, it was a conservative effort. There was no Democrat participation in this bill. They were 100% against this bill. So I think in that regard, that is what helped us get such a good product, is because we were very choosy about who we worked with and how we formulated our language. How does this affect the high school curriculum in Texas? And how do we know that CRT won't be taught? Okay, so how it affects the curriculum in Texas is some curriculum will be new. Your children will be, once they're able to implement the new civics education part, your children will actually be being taught, you know, a fully developed curriculum of civics. And then, but to the extent, and I know there are school districts, of course, not every school district in the state has this problem, but to the extent that school districts or classrooms were using questionable teaching methods, those will be eliminated. And so for any of you who have high schoolers or really any grade, you know, pay attention. One of the things that this statute does is if your child has a login for online learning, and most of the school districts, most of the larger school districts anyway, have that. The parents are entitled now by statute to have a login. So you can log in to the online system that your son or daughter or grandson or granddaughter, whoever is learning from, and you can see the Quizlets, the notes, the lectures, the tests, the things that are being put online for your students learning that they are using to do their homework and everything else at home. You now have a legal right to be able to log in to that system. One of the questions was about taxpayers pay for public education and have a right to know what is being taught. Is it legal to put cameras in the classroom? Cameras in the classrooms are probably problematic just because of so many minors in the classroom. I'm sure most of you are aware that so oftentimes when the media is doing anything, the face of the minor is blurred out. So not only are there concerns about minors, there's also a cost concern. I think it would be extremely expensive to put cameras in every classroom in every school throughout the state. And I think that at this point that might be a little bit of overkill. But again, I think that we need to pay attention to what's going on, use these logins, and if there's something that you're concerned about, then go to your school district, and if you have to take it up the chain to the commissioner. Let's see. Okay. One of the questions related to, I think many of you are familiar that the one of the COVID relief bills, I believe it was the CARES Act, funded a lot of money to schools, and the Department of Education has put out some advisories about including some learning that basically would be prohibited under this statute, that the Department of Education would like to see this learning included if you're taking these grants. And so, you know, how to get around that problem? Well, there's a couple of ways, and I'm not here to give you legal, I am a lawyer, I am licensed, but I'm not here to give you legal advice. But from the limited amount of research that I've done on this issue, number one, education is something that is reserved to the state. And so it is not something that the federal government gets to preempt under the Supremacy Clause. It's something that is reserved to the state. And so the state's control. Also, this is not in the CARES Act. It's not actually in the statute. It's in guidance that has been issued by the Department of Education. So since we have a statute that's on point, our statute controls over any Department of Education advisory. So if you read anywhere that the schools will be violating federal law, number one, you need to question, who is this person you're reading? Are they a lawyer? Because if they aren't, they shouldn't be giving legal advice. Number two, again, this is based on my research and a conversation that I've had with Pat Hardy of the State Board of Education, and she and Commissioner Morath have talked about this, and that's basically the same information that they have relayed, is that this is a statute. It's going to control. The Department of Education guidance is not going to be a controlling factor. So I believe that is all the questions that were submitted on SB3. I hope that you found this informative. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me at vplegislation@tfrw.org. And again, we're very happy that you joined us tonight. We hope that you found this informative. It was an incredible experience. Looking back on it, it's kind of like labor, when you're going through it, you're like, oh my God, I'm never going to do this again. But now that it's over, it's like, oh my God, I can't wait for the next session. So, we're ready.
We're ready to have another baby. It's true. We're very excited. I hope you ladies enjoyed being part of the legislative process and really doing more than hearing about it after it's done and saying, hey, yay, thank you for that. I hope that you really got involved this year more than you have before. Listening to our legislators, they certainly said the TFRW is more involved than they've ever been before. So I was happy to hear about that, because in talking to the board, they have every intention of staying this course and be very, very involved in the future. So I'm very excited about that. I like where we're going. As the state's largest, most influential political organization, we need to be involved. Who better to stand up for our children and our families than TFRW? So thank you, ladies. Thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for being with us through the session. And if you have something that you think that TFRW needs to take up as a cause, as an issue that you think would represent our women, by all means, please email Robbi and say, hey, I think this is something that's important that we ought to consider. She will bring that to the board and we'll talk about that. But that's all we have for tonight. And thank you very much. We'll talk to you hopefully at convention in just a couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.